Have you ever thought about Earth itself as an intelligent, well, not creature, but maybe an entity? Like it has a mind and some survival instincts of its own. When said like this, it sounds like you're about to watch a fantasy movie where the planet we walk and live our daily lives on will suddenly wake up, realize it doesn't like us that much after all, and just go crazy. Hope not. But we're not actually talking about such scenarios. More of the idea that the collective activity of life, like microbes and plants, can change a planet and give it a life of its own. It's like the planet has a green mind. The metaphor of Earth as a living planet makes sense. Creatures across the globe crawl, swim, walk, and fly through the uppermost layers of our land, ocean, and sky. Plants cover much of our world. Plus, there are viruses and bacteria in the water, soil, and even atmosphere. Now imagine all the living things on Earth, like plants, animals, and microbes, as a giant team working together. They have different jobs, but they all do their thing to make the planet a better place to live. For example, plants make oxygen that we breathe, and animals help pollinate flowers. Together, they form the biosphere, which is like the Earth's team of life. That's where the idea of planetary intelligence comes in. Just like individuals and groups can be intelligent, so can an entire planet. Researchers believe we should measure the planet's intelligence by its ability to keep itself going forever. And just like how humans need to work together to survive, a planet's collective intelligence is measured by the capacity of all the life on it to work together towards this same goal. It's like the planet is a complex system that knows how to take care of itself. Like forests. They can share nutrients through their secret underground networks of fungi. This helps all the trees stay healthy. We can obviously learn a lot from forests. If we jump into the fantasy universe while looking for intelligent, conscious planets, we definitely choose Mogo from Green Lantern. It's a specific planetary entity that can do things like changing its weather and altering gravity, plant growth, or some other surface conditions. Or how about the stunning Pandora from Avatar? Do you remember the fascinating scenes of flora and fauna there? With organs that might remind you of tentacles. They enable creatures to interlink with each other on a neural level. It's like the entire planet is like one giant brain, with many smaller trees, creatures, and its other pieces as its cells. We're far from that, but it's still nice to imagine. At the moment, our civilization is in the stage scientists named an immature technosphere. That means we're still too focused on using technology that doesn't always do good for our planet. We don't have a planetary intelligence or a collective understanding of what needs to be done to do better for our planet. Instead, we're all just doing our own thing. I mean, we're not at the worst stage. Researchers have come up with 4 stages of Earth's past and future to explain how planetary intelligence could impact the long-term future of humanity. The first stage is what we call the immature biosphere. It's when life first started on Earth, billions of years ago. Only microbes were there on the bare land without any vegetation. There wasn't any global feedback, which means these microbes couldn't yet affect Earth, its atmosphere, or other systems in any way. The second stage is the mature biosphere, which was 2.5 billion to 540 million years ago, when stable continents formed and the biosphere started to have a strong influence on the Earth. The third stage, known as immature technosphere, is where we are now, with interlinked systems of communication, technology, transportation, electricity, and computers that draw resources from Earth's systems and affect the biosphere. The fourth stage, also known as the mature technosphere, is where Earth should aim to be in the future. It means technology will benefit the entire planet. We'll use sustainable forms of energy, like solar power. Planetary intelligence is the sign of a mature planet, and researchers are trying to figure out how we can move towards it. So, things we do on an individual level do matter. The collective activity of life, like microbes or plants, can change a planet and make it more than just a lifeless rock floating in space. Through the biosphere, our home planet kind of figured out how to host life by itself billions of years ago, and it's still going. Now we need to figure out how to have a similar kind of self-maintaining system, but this time with the technosphere. It's hard to imagine planets could generally become sentient, like Pandora, or some other imaginary conscious world out there. There are a few reasons for that. First, planets form based on how different materials, like rocks, gases, and liquids gather around a new star. It's like you have a big family gathering, where everyone brings different ingredients to make a delicious dish. And just like how these ingredients won't suddenly turn into a living being, the materials that make up a planet won't just turn into self-aware creatures. On Earth, after billions of years of complex chemical reactions, some molecules started to replicate themselves and carry information. That's how life on our planet began. And Earth is the only such example we have. Here's the second reason. Imagine you have a big garden where you plant a lot of mushrooms or bacteria, hoping they'll become really smart and help you take care of the garden. But mushrooms and bacteria don't have brains like we do. It's not like they need it anyway. Having a big brain is really expensive for animals too. It takes a lot of energy to keep it running. So, animals only become as smart as they need to be to survive and thrive in their environment. Dogs and cats are pretty smart because they need to be able to avoid danger and find food. They don't need human kind of intelligence for things like building houses, creating art, or inventing new technologies. So, it would be hard to bring all living beings and plants to the same level of intelligence. The third reason why it would be difficult for a planet to become sentient is the main rule of the animal kingdom. Life is all about survival of the fittest. Every creature is competing for resources like water, food, and space. But not only do different species compete against each other, but individuals within the same species also fight. Just think of how fiddler crabs fight for territory on the beach, or how wolf packs fight over prey. Or me, when I see an empty spot on a crowded beach. This kind of competition is not a good base for global cooperation. There are a couple of exceptions to this rule. For example, ants. They may not be the brightest creatures on the planet, but when they come together in colonies, they can achieve amazing things, like gathering food that's way bigger than them, building nests, raising young, and even farming. In fact, they act like a superorganism called a hive mind, where every ant works together towards a common goal. Insects like bees and ants are very altruistic and work together to ensure their queen reproduces. If one large ant colony took over our whole planet, it could act as a single mind and work towards the colony's and planet's interests until they run out of resources. But in reality, it's hard to imagine any organism, even a superorganism, could reach such a level of self-awareness and consciousness. Number 5. How could we keep in contact? When it comes to communication, ants use pheromones and humans use nerves. Both of these methods work well for small organisms, but when it comes to a giant planet-sized entity, it would be hard to make such communication fast and efficient. So, communication within a planet-sized entity would be much slower than what we have in our homes, like our computers or smartphones. Oh well, we'll just continue dreaming about Pandora.
Back in 2013, an online article about plants caused quite a stir in the scientific community, mostly because it posed a radical thought, suggesting that plants might be smarter than we give them credit for. The claims weren't met with enthusiasm back then. Plant biology experts were quick to deny this information. There was no way plants could be considered smart. However, research papers from recent years can educate us on plants' abilities to communicate, learn, solve problems, and even remember stuff. But is this enough for us to call plants intelligent? Let's start with their ability to communicate. There's this intriguing theory that's been floating around, hinting that plants and trees might just be having conversations of their own. And no, they don't have cell phones or internet connections. It looks like some plants chat with each other through a network of mushrooms growing around their roots. Scientists have affectionately termed this mushroom community the Wood Wide Web. It's suggested these networks could be used for anything from shipping nutrients around to warning each other about impending dangers, like, say, a hungry caterpillar. If you think about it, communication could be a pretty handy skill for plants to have. They can't exactly pick up and run when danger is near or move around to spread their seeds in their surroundings. Because of these challenges, plants got creative. They seem to have teamed up with fungi to exchange messages and resources. Pretty innovative if you ask me. Plants may also communicate using sound. Human ears, for example, can't pick up all kinds of sound waves. In fact, we can only hear sounds with frequencies that swing between 20 and 20,000 hertz. Anything lower than 20 is like a secret code being whispered below our range. We call this subsonic. And then there are sounds that zoom past the upper limit of our hearing. We call these ones ultrasonic. Plants seem to communicate in sound ranges that are not accessible to us, particularly ultrasonic ones. But they're getting the message across to other plants and some animals too. Remarkably, these plant sounds can have surprising effects. It's what makes some herbs develop peculiar friendships. An Australian study showcased this particular companionship between basil and chili plants. The basil helped the chili grow faster than it had done before. One suggestion was that the plants vibrate, and these vibrations create sounds. Even though we can't hear them, these sounds may be fun or even beneficial to the entire plant community. Communication is just one piece of the intelligence puzzle. Could plants also learn from experiences? Well, a group of scientists decided to give this a shot. They set up an experiment with pea plants, using a fan as the stimulus and light as the reward. For a few days, they would turn on both the fan and the lights simultaneously, creating an association in the pea plants' minds that a gust of wind equals food on the way. After only 4 days, the plants started leaning towards the fan even without the lights being turned on. It seemed that the plants had learned to respond to the fan's breeze as if it meant food was coming. This was amazing for researchers because it showed that plants can indeed learn from their experiences, a notion that until the experiment seemed impossible. Plants may also have some sort of memory. Scientists have also looked into this fascinating aspect of their life. But how did they figure out that plants can remember? We'll have to travel back to 2014 for that, when a groundbreaking study was performed. It found that plants can indeed create memories. What's even more awesome, they need a single day to begin this process. The star of this botanical experiment is the shy Mimosa pudica, known as the sensitive plant. Sure, it doesn't have a nervous system like us, but it began showing signs of learning in just 24 hours. This peculiar plant has a unique defense mechanism, the ability to fold its leaves inward when threatened. It's a disguise, basically. Once its leaves are folded, it doesn't look as appetizing for any hungry critters nearby. The scientists behind the study used a clever setup. Think of it as a miniature elevator to test our leafy friend's memory. They simulated a fall by dropping the mimosa plant 60 times at 5-second intervals. This movement made the plant fold into its signature form. But here's the curious part. After those 60 drops, the plant stopped folding its leaves. It's as if the plant realized that the fall wasn't going to hurt. This experiment was carried out with over 50 different mimosa plants, and most of them showed the same learned behavior and stopped curling their leaves. What this shows is that the plant was able to remember the fall and understand that it didn't need to react defensively to it. The plant learned that the drops were harmless, and it stopped wasting unnecessary energy to protect itself. If plants are really intelligent, do we need to start worrying about them? Evolution sometimes works in mysterious ways, so you can't help but wonder if flowers or herbs might one day take over the world. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, though. For plants to decide that they want to rule the world, they'd first need to develop some sort of consciousness. If we look at this potential ability as being similar to that of humans, plants will need to have some skills. For starters, they should have their own language. Then, they would need a sort of brain that can store very complex information. Lastly, they've got to have a way to interact with and, more importantly, change their surroundings. Now, you're probably wondering, how would this happen? Plants just can't get up and walk around, can they? Well, it's easy to think that because plants are stuck in one place, they're not really that clever. But that may not be true. Recent research shows that even though they can't slide away from danger or stroll down the street to grab some tasty fertilizer, plants are still pretty smart. Scientists have pointed out that plants are, in fact, really good at understanding their surroundings, even better than us or animals. Believe it or not, every tiny root tip of a plant can monitor around 15 different environmental factors, all at the same time. While humans have a centralized brain, a plant's brain is kind of all over the place, but mostly in its roots. And this strategy works wonders for them. After all, if a nibbling deer or a lawnmower came along and munched off their head, there goes their brain. But plants are smarter. They spread their intelligence through their roots so that they can keep going even if 90% of their root tips get chopped off. Plants are also not as immobile as we like to believe. They move all the time, just not the way we do. You'll see plants following sunlight, flowering, and even taking little naps. There's more to plant intelligence than just activity and movement. They're also good at math, can perceive us, and just like those cute animals that help each other, plants also show kindness to their kin. They can identify themselves and interact with animals and other plants by releasing attractive scents and a mix of different chemicals. In 2013, a group of scientists found that tiny mustard weeds can do math to avoid going hungry during the night. These clever plants make starch using sunlight, and then, at night, they calculate how much starch they have left. Then they divide their starch reserve by the number of hours left until dawn, so they have enough to last till sunrise. Their math skills are so good, they manage to use about 95% of their resources just in time for their morning photosynthesis session. Also, according to researchers from Tel Aviv University, plants can see us using special photoreceptors. They know when we're near and can even tell if we're wearing a red or blue shirt. Does all this information mean we need to see plants as a threat? Probably not, but it does show us that we still have a lot to learn about our local flora. Also, it may help us better understand our planet.
Now, this is something to crow about. They might not seem to be the smartest creatures in the world, but some crows actually have brains bigger than yours, in proportion to the rest of their bodies, of course. The New Caledonian crow has a brain that makes up nearly 3% of its total body weight. The proportion is similar to that in dolphins and great apes. An adult human's brain only weighs around 2% of their body weight. I think mine's lower than that. Research has also shown that the crow's forebrains are more packed with neurons than those of primates. This area of the brain defines the intelligence of an animal. So, more neurons means better cognitive reasoning. They could even be the smartest non-humans on the planet and smarter than 7-year-old humans. Scientists offered 6 wild crows a series of tests to see how well they understand causal relationships. The tests were based on Aesop's fable, where a thirsty crow was dropping rocks to raise the water level in a pitcher. The real-life crows had to drop heavy objects into tubes filled with water. The birds were given a choice of objects to drop. They knew they had to choose solid and not hollow objects to drop, and a tube filled with water and not sand. They also opted for the tube with a higher level of water, knowing it would get them to the final goal with less work. All of the birds have successfully solved the puzzle, unlike little humans aged 4 to 6 and faster than 7-year-olds. Another experiment has proved that crows are capable of analogical thinking. The smart birds were given a tray with 3 cups on it. The middle cup had a card on it with a color, a shape, or a number. The side cups also had images on top of them, one the same as on the middle cup and one different from it. There was food inside the cup with a matching picture. Crows quickly figured out how it all worked and started choosing matching cards to get the treat. During the next round of the experiment, they got cards with pairs of items on it. These were pairs of identical items on 2 of the cards, let's say 2 circles and 2 triangles. The remaining 2 cards had diverse images, a circle with a heart and a square with a triangle. So they had to find a match for a card with 2 identical items and 2 different items. The birds instantly figured out the task and picked the right cards each time. No dummies there. Crows thrive on every continent except Antarctica and South America. Crows and their close relatives, ravens, magpies, and jays, have learned not only to survive among humans, but to make use of this relationship. Crows who live in cities in America and Japan, for example, have learned to drop tough nuts onto streets with heavy traffic and wait for the vehicles to crush the nuts for them. Then the birds wait for traffic lights to go green for pedestrians and safely pick up the treats from the ground. In 2011, a team from the University of Washington proved that crows can recognize human faces and remember their enemies. One researcher put on a caveman mask, and another one wore a Dick Cheney mask. The caveman visited 5 sites to catch and ban some wild crows. Once they were released, the birds made some loud, angry caws. They did it to warn their pals there was a bold intruder nearby. The pals would then fly over to punish the Neanderthal with some pretty angry sounds. The experiment's Dick Cheney did pretty much nothing. Scientists would revisit the exact same spots for 5 years, and the birds would always greet the caveman with angry scolds and ignore Dick Cheney. Some of the birds who took part in the original experiment were not even alive anymore, but it looked like they had passed down the knowledge to their young. They can also, somehow, tell if a human presents a direct threat to them or is just minding their own business. Crows take off much sooner when they notice a person moving their way and staring at them. Most birds and other animals prefer to run away when humans are approaching, even when they're just strolling by. Crows feel when it's okay to stay relaxed and when they must escape danger. Family means a lot to crows. They normally find one partner for life and live in pairs or small family groups. In the cold wintertime, they join hundreds and even thousands of their peers to survive the nights in a unit called a roost. During the nesting season, young crows help their parents defend the nest from many intruders. They can also bring food to their parents or directly to the youngest siblings. It's like takeout. Some birds keep helping their parents for several years. Crows also make friends for life and form huge gangs to protect themselves from predators. They swoop in to harass any unwanted aggressive guests and even go after larger birds like owls or hawks or other animals. Sometimes they also get together to steal food from larger creatures. Some members of the group distract the predator's attention while others do the sneaky business. Now, it may all sound like caw, caw to you, but crows have a whole variety of sounds, and each of them means something to others of their kind. They can warn prospective intruders that they're about to enter their territory or let their relatives know their location. That language isn't universal. It varies from valley to valley, pretty much like regional dialects. If a crow decides to join a new flock for some reason, it will have to learn to caw their language by mimicking the sounds of other members of the new flock. Crows have more self-control than many people. If someone offered you a treat you could get right now and another, more delicious one you'd have to wait for, what would you choose? The smarty pants with feathers have proven they know that waiting a bit pays off. Researchers first tested the crow's dietary preferences: bread, grapes, sausage, fried pork fat, and other treats. Each of the birds had their favorites. Then they offered them their least favorite food. After a few seconds to 10 minutes, the researchers offered the birdies a more delicious treat or a bigger portion of the same snack. They had the option to grab whatever they got and fly, but that would mean no hope of getting a better treat. The participating crows chose to wait only for a higher quality snack they'd enjoy more. They didn't want to wait to get the second portion of the same old snack. Only when they got the desired food would the participants leave the testing grounds. Other birds, like pigeons, chickens, and gray parrots, didn't show that kind of patience and self-control during the same experiment. Our heroes of the day never waste food. When they have too much of it, they hide it in caches for later in some secret spots or in leaves or other objects. Once they feel hungry again, they know exactly where to go to find their supplies. Sometimes they also add some markers on the top of the cache to remember where it was or move food from spot to spot to protect it from some other hungry mouths. They also know which food goes bad first and finish meat before other types of meals, like nuts or bread, that stay good for longer. Crows also craft and use their own tools. They've learned to carve thin strips of wood in skewers and bend wires into hooks to pick up food that is out of reach. They remember the design and recreate the same kind of tool. Crows also know how to combine materials that wouldn't work separately to build one complex tool. Only humans and great apes were known to do something like that before. It also looks like crows enjoy the process of making and using a tool. Their behavior changes after successfully using a tool, just like we humans feel happy after finishing a complicated work assignment.